I looked at my wife of 5 years and told Erin, it was him or me, there was no in between. She shook her head in surprise, her blonde hair shining in the light. Just for the weekend, everything will be back to normal on Monday. Can't you just play with the elf first? It's Elle Logan, her real name is Ellen Johnson. She's been sitting next to me for the last few hours trying her best to seduce me. She's an attractive woman with dark hair and one of the best bodies in the world. Especially if you like curves, which I definitely do. I'm a regular writer of detective novels and thrillers, and my main character is Rick Rourke, who sometimes solves the mysteries of locked rooms and sometimes jumps off cliffs to escape madmen. I have a beautiful wife who is attracted to Plato, and they met at a dinner and dance Mr. PLG hosted for his writers and editors. Aged Erin, he was 10 years older than Erin, who was 28, with long dark hair and a stocky build, and as I watched them dance I could see that he moved lightly as well, and when they took a break they all came back to our table, and Mr. G said, "You have a wonderful wife, Donald, and she dances very well," and I nodded, and I didn't respond for what seemed like a second, and then he said, "Well, I should go take care of the other guests. Nice to meet you." Mrs. Erin smiled and answered, "Plato." I looked at her. There was no doubt she moved from Mr. G to Plato too quickly. I asked her what she thought of my boss. Yes, he was cute. She gave me a horny smile. Let's see whose wife he grabbed next. She turned out to be an editor's wife, and grabbed 3 more during the night. All of this happened about a month ago. My name is Donald Lake. No nicknames. I'm about 6 feet tall, weigh 169 pounds, curly brown hair, blue eyes, 30 years old. I was in great shape and loved sports. Erin was in great shape and she practiced fencing, a sport of skill and coordination, and that's where I met her. I'm doing routine research for Rick, who is supposed to fight with a sword in his next book, The Adventurer. I always do tons of research before I write an adventure book. It's one of my main selling points, and Rick wouldn't do anything I hadn't already tried. I realized I was a writer in school, and I wrote story after story. 2 of the stories I wrote in high school were published in obscure literary magazines. I considered myself a serious writer until I finished school and needed to work for a living. We found common ground immediately. She's a sweetheart, but married, with kids in elementary school. I met Erin while writing my second rock and roll novel. After I finished the book, I got advice from her about sword fighting, and we went on a couple of dates and were soon in bed. She was not a wealthy woman and was able to make it through the initial stages of the business thanks to a loan from the family trust. One section of the store sold a variety of musical instruments, and another section sold a variety of music recordings and sheet music, so fencing was just a hobby for us. But I sold my press to Mr. G, or Plato as Erin called him, and one day Erin came home and excitedly told Donnie that Plato was inviting us to his island next weekend. And I stared at her. "You mean Mr. G? More accurately, why is it you who's telling me this and not him?" And I bumped into him last week, and we had lunch, and then I gave him a tour of the store, and then today he called and invited me. He said he wanted to know more about the writer, and I'm sure he'll be in touch with you soon, but my question is, has he been in touch with you, and how many of you has he been in touch with? Donut, you're delusional, not paranoid. Tell me, why didn't you mention lunch and shopping until today? It was last week. She turned it down. Well, Donald, he kind of tried to pick me up and I turned him down, but I didn't say anything because I thought you'd get in trouble. After all, he owns the company and he's got a special friend who's going to be there and the staff, and of course it's all about getting to know you better, and in my opinion it's about getting to know all of you. How can I afford to do that? Are you sure you can afford to do that? 15 minutes later he called me back and said, "Hello Donald, looking forward to our weekend on the island." I declined Mr. G. I felt uncomfortable. My wife seemed to know about it, but I didn't. As a matter of fact, I think she had lunch with you, but she didn't tell me. She said that you were pestering her. She was afraid that I'd react badly if I told her everything. I was just trying to get to know both of you better. I'm sorry. Mr. G. No, it's a shame you feel that way, Donald. I hope you change your mind. I'm not taking the weekend off. We're splitting up, and about 3 hours later I'm working on the next Rick book and I get a call from my agent Brock Levin. "Donald, you turned down Mr. G's offer. Why? How did you find out about this?" "Brock, the VP of sales. Called me. Did he threaten you? Not directly, but the threat was there. This guy was tough. I said I'll get in touch with you, Brock. After I hung up I sent Sally the end of the new book and some notes. She called later and we talked about it all. I found a picture of the place on Google Maps and I learned about the whole thing. The island is 2 miles long and about a mile wide, and it's about a mile long and about a mile wide, and it's about a mile long and about a mile wide, and about a mile long and about a mile long and about a mile wide, and about a mile wide, and about a mile wide, and about a mile long, miles long and about 1 mile wide, and is located among several islands off the coast of North Carolina where people go to play golf and enjoy beach vacations. I downloaded detailed photos of the place and compiled them into a topographical map. In my opinion, to get to and from this place, you need a decent boat or a seaplane. I had a big chicken salad and white wine and she got up and went to get changed. While they were eating, Aaron said, I heard you might change your mind about not going to the island. I looked at her and Plato said, you can change your mind at lunch. Don't be silly, he's in New York and we're in Virginia. He called me. He has a condo in Miller. How do you know he's in New York? He said if we agreed he'd have his plane pick us up from National Airport, but we won't agree to that, Aaron. I didn't change my mind. Donald Reich, would you fuck him? I'm not going without you, Don. How could you? If I'm going alone, anything could happen. When you get back it will happen. I'm not taking that chance. I won't. So I trust you. Do you trust me at all? And now is where my trust jar is almost empty. I started laughing at her and she realized how stupid it sounded and joined me, and we hugged and kissed and went upstairs for a whole hour. And when we were lying in bed the unpleasant talk faded away and Aaron said, I'm not going to risk my life for some billionaire, I swear. And I noticed she seemed to think we'd go to that island after all. Well, it's decided. Then she tensed her face but said nothing. I asked her, why do you want to go on this trip so badly? Just the facts, not the reasons. She didn't answer for a while. I asked her, it seems so important to be with such an important, and I asked her if it seemed exciting to be with someone so important and influential. I'm sorry, I didn't mean with him. I was just talking to you, Aaron. I've researched it. He was born rich, of course. He made a lot of money, but he has a huge hot streak. He chases women just like you do. Well, I'm still convinced that everything is going to be fine and fun, and I've been thinking about it, and we are getting ready to have a baby. And if Aaron's going to cheat on me, now's the time to cheat on her, and if that's the case, I think I'd like to see her do it. If that's the case, I think I'd like to find out now, not when we have kids. I used to love her. She's smart, she's spunky, she's sexy. Now I'm skeptical. Okay, Aaron, we can go, but I'm warning you, if you go with this guy we're done. There's no turning back. Do you understand? Do you understand? I'm glad we're doing this. I've decided that the warning I've just given is my final warning. Either she's a good wife or she's not. The next day I accepted the invitation and made contingency arrangements with my friend, and I checked to see if there was any mobile communications on the island. There was on the island, but just in case I took my satellite phone with me, and we landed on a small plane from home at a small airfield, where a black man called Simon was there to meet us. He took us to the marina where we boarded a boat with a nice cabin and a powerful engine. The boat was piloted by another man, Charlie, and after about 40 minutes we docked on the island. Simon told us where it was and briefly described what there was to do on the island. He was a nice guy, taller than me, muscular, and had a great laugh. Up front, Simon said, you don't seem to be very happy with this trip, Mr. Lake. Just call me Don. I have a question. How long have you been working on the island? You're his bodyguard too, aren't you? Yes. Just in case. He's a big guy. I'm sure he can take care of himself. Yes. You could say I'm here just in case once or twice things don't go too well, but on those days I'm not needed. Look at you. Maybe I'll be ready. Do you have a weapon? No. I have a knife, but knives are everywhere. Is there a gun on the island? No, they're not allowed. I think it says so in the memo you got. Yes, but I don't trust her too much. I'm not an easy person to trust these days. The boat is tight against the dock. Simon and the young man on the dock tie up the boat. Simon takes Aaron's hand and I jump out of the boat. Simon looks a little worried. He's dressed casually in swim trunks and a sleeveless shirt, and with him is the most beautiful woman in the world. I looked at her because I knew who else would be with us. She was the semi-official mistress of the island and also lived in a couple of houses owned by Mr. G. There was a time when we could see her with the other noble men, but it wasn't common now. Mr. J seemed to have gotten an exclusive deal, at least to some extent. Mr. G held out his hand and shook Ella's hand, and Ella embraced Aaron, and then Mr. G embraced Aaron, and Ella embraced me, and in the middle of the embrace, she tasted and felt great. Her lips touched my ear. We were taken to the big room at the AAR and offered drinks. It was 1 p.m. We had a small snack on the plane, but the plane had a small buffet for us. I gave up on the alcohol and got sparkling water, Aaron got wine, and they both ate a small amount of food from the buffet. I sent it to Sally last week. I thought it would be on time. Yes, I know you're always on time. Donald is sometimes even earlier. He laughs and asks me what you're talking about. I've read all your books. Maybe I'll read them early. Mr. G backs me up. We'll see, dear, and then turns to Aaron. My dear, how's the music business going? She writes serious novels, but still sells a lot of books. Yes, she's at the top of our sales charts. But Donald, she's not even close to you. And then there's Morgan. Her name's Belle Starling. She's a romance novelist. She's the #1 seller in our company, and Morgan only does the baking. This works in my favor. I looked at your contract last week and you still owe us a book. Yes, it's true. I thought about Christmas for 9 months, but work is already in full swing, Elle said. Are you switching titles? Yes, sometimes thrillers need a break, and then I switched. The next book is The English Village Mystery, which I worked on when we were there last summer, said Elle. Plato was raving about your sales. Each book sells better than the one before it, said Aaron, which gathers readers for our future. Elle said, but do you have the money at home? Yes, I do, and I haven't touched it since the store opened for business until now. The three of us stood up and Ella took us into a large double bedroom. She closed the door and we changed into our bathing suits. I wore regular swim trunks, but Aaron wore a super short pink bikini. Honey, I didn't like the tone of my voice, but she held her tongue, and when we got down, Elle was wearing an electric blue bikini that was as small as Aaron's, and I was totally in love with her. We both got out of the car and walked down to the beach on the south side of the island where there was a wooden path, and Mr. G was already there. Mr. G was already in the water. He was swimming behind the breakers. Aeon said, I don't want to swim that far, and neither do I. I don't want to. Ella closed her eyes when she said that. I dove in and surfaced and swam to where Mr. G was paddling across the water with his crawled. I joined him. He was swimming well. I joined him too. He was a good swimmer for his size, but my body was better suited to the water and I kept up with him easily. Sometimes I changed strokes. I swam until he got tired and he headed back and I followed him. As we swam to the shore, a big wave knocked him to the ground. I walked over to him and helped him up. He spit out the sea water and sand, and I held him tightly as we walked out. We approached the women lying on the sun loungers, and I asked them who wanted to swim. Ella immediately stood up and she held up her hands so that her top slipped slightly. I looked at Aaron and she shook her head, then I ran after Elle. I was so happy to see her. From the back she looked like an Olympian, jumping into the waves and swimming out of the break. I let her swim about 4 meters in front of me and then watched her from the side as she rolled over and floated on her back with her breasts bobbing in the water. So I joined her and swam side by side with her. We swam some distance and then she said, I've had enough, and swam to shore. I laughed. There was only one way to find out. She took a step towards me, then stopped and said we couldn't do that this year, no matter how much I wanted to. She turned and ran on land. She wasn't as fast as she was in the water, and I caught up with her easily. We came out on the balcony and our people were gone, and I wondered if this had happened, and I asked her, can you really do what you say you can do? Yeah, I mean, I can't jump from building to building, but I wanted to know how believable it was that Rick could do something like that. But she came back like she wanted to. She's a capable woman, and I said, come on, I'm married to a great woman and I want to keep it that way. I'm doing you a favor. Come on, I laughed. A writer with a tongue tied in his cheek. My God, yeah, I want you to understand I'm not going to have sex with you this weekend, whatever they decide to do if they get to that point. I'll be gone and most likely I'll regret what I just said for a long time. I laughed. I'm in mourning for you. It's not going to be easy to get rid of my tail. When I went upstairs to get changed, I didn't see anyone, but when I got into our room, the shower had already started, and as soon as I heard it, it stopped without a vote. Erin wrapped in a towel and opened the door, and when she saw me, she gasped and asked, did I get you already? No, please understand, Erin, I hope you don't go with Mr. G. Either we talked about it and things haven't changed. What were you guys doing while we were swimming? They don't know how long Elle and I will be gone. I'm sure they've been watching us for some time while we've been swimming. He's a gentleman, but he'll come for you sooner or later. He'll come for you sooner or later, and you know it. And she'll come for you. He'll have just as much chance of getting me as she'll have of getting you. She grinned. It's uncomfortable, but I won't. You'd better not do it, or else. We've already talked about it. Nothing will change. There were drinks and snacks at 5. We had time to fall in love. She put down the towel. I admit I was still nervous because of LSO. I attacked Erin with genuine enthusiasm and she reciprocated my feelings. When we finished we realized the window was open. Erin said it was okay. After all, we were married. I looked out the window and Elle sat about 6 meters away from us, about 6 meters away in the sunshine. She looked up and smiled, waved, and then reached for her shorts. I averted my eyes from the window. Erin noticed I was hard again and stared at me. Then she looked out the window and stood frozen for a moment. There was a moan from outside and Erin turned to me again and said, "Jesus, Donnie, forget yourself. She can have me. I can give you up." "I won't give up." Erin smiled at me. "You have to beg her to give up or you don't stand a chance." "I've already done that, but it doesn't seem to be working." "I guess Plato gave her a task so he could have me. That's weird too." She looked at me and I still had an erection. "Surely we could have sex at least every 2 hours. That should help." Maybe we went to the main room in our casual clothes. I wore Docker shorts and a collared shirt and Erin wore a dress that let her hair down and high-heeled sandals on her feet. There was no doubt she looked hot when we arrived and Mr. G was drinking a beer. Mr. G said, "Donald, how was your swim with Elle?" "Very well, Mr. G. She's a very talented swimmer and that's just one of her many talents." "Call me Plato." "Very nice name, I like it. He was a very famous man. My father, rest in peace. I love reading about him." Elle came and she was wearing a dress too and high heels. The dress looked decent but not on her. I moved closer to Erin and put my arm around her shoulders and Plato said, "There's wine, cocktails, beer, and pretzels. And pretzels are my favorite." And he says that as he eats one of them. And I slide over to the bench and take the barbell off the rack and do 5 reps, and then he puts it back, and Ella's standing on top of me and stares as hard as she can, and then she says, "And he's only done 3 reps, and then he rests," and she starts to gasp for air, and I raise the barbell, and I do 8 reps more, and then he puts her in her place and said, "Everyone has their strengths, and you have so many strengths, you know. What role should I play this weekend? Seduce me so PL can take care of Erin." "Yeah, it's happened before. I always get the job done, even if it's usually not very pleasant, but you'll be happy." I thought as she gave me a killer smile. "If I start begging you, will you stop?" The 3 of them were huddled in the living room talking and when I entered they were silent. After that PL said something to drink. "Donald, beer, maybe?" I looked over at the bar and walked over and pulled out a bottle of Corona and opened it. The rest had wine. We talked for a while longer. Then I asked if you guys were done discussing your episodes or if I should just leave, which caused an awkward silence. Ella watched silently the other 2 guys, mainly Erin. Erin looked at play at that point. Simon came in and announced that dinner was served. We went into the dining room. The buffet table was full of dishes. It was served family style. We sat at one end of a large table. They poured water but I drank a beer and didn't have any water. It broke up the conversation. He said that I had caused the tension. We chatted amicably about politics and baseball. Plato was a Yankees fan. Erin and I rooted for the Orioles and the Nationals. Elle liked the Pirates. He was a friend of Jonah's. Plato is a Yankees fan. Erin and I root for the Orioles and the Nationals. Elle likes the Pirates. From Jonah to Simon, it's all dessert tiramisu. I missed my tiramisu. Plato seems to understand that. It's good not to eat dessert. I have to control my waist. You don't have any fat in your body. I've seen you swim when you don't drink water, only beer. Plato, as I have already before coming here told my wife, my trust bank is empty. Can you blame me? Erin said, "Do you believe they will drug you with banned substances? This is crazy. Don't be like Donald." I laughed and pushed a glass of water to his mouth. When Simon showed up, Plato said, "Please clear the table." Simon saw how the water and desserts were set up. He took my glass of water and the uneaten tiramisu and carried them away. Elle said, "Let's go to the patio. There will be music there. We can dance." Erin and Plato stayed silent. I stood up and gave my hand to Elle and he took her to the patio. "Do you really blame him for giving you food and water? Do you really believe he would stuff you?" "I don't think so, but he didn't take any of them and made his boyfriend take them away." The other 2 came out and soft music played. The music ended and we sat at a table with Plato and Elle. The music played again and Elle stood up and held out her hand to me and she led me to the floor and we danced and I could see Plato dancing with Erin. Elle was probably the best distraction in the world. Attention seeker. She smelled sweet and had a beautifully curved body. Every time she did it on me I went into some sort of trance and I was immediately happy. This time I also saw Plato's hand on Erin's ass. Erin saw this and tried to get away from Plato, but Plato continued to put his hand on her ass. She gently pushed on his chest and said, "I don't want to have a problem, Plato let go of him, but he took her hand and led her back to the table. Isla came back after me and we sat down. She was very close to me. Plato said, "I'm disappointed in you, Donald. Ella is a wonderful lover. She would have given you the most intense and pleasurable experience of your life, and you denied her the opportunity. I have a wife. I can't trade." That's what we discussed at the beginning. The fact that you would agree to have sex with this guy means that it's all over between us. Everything is over between us. And I turned to head for the stairs. She screamed, "No, Donnie, don't," and I walked to the stairway and grabbed my bag that I had packed earlier and walked out of the back fire escape room. I called the phone and ran into the darkness sobbing as I ran. My friend Todd Jacobs was flying the plane and I was heading towards him when Plato and Simon appeared behind me. Plato screamed, "No, you idiot, you can't get away, you should have stayed here and calmed your wife down." He rushed at me. I was already at the dock. Plato couldn't control himself and couldn't fight, maybe because Todd was pointing a gun at him. So Simon didn't get close. I threw Plato into the water. I got on the plane, Todd drove off the taxiway, and we flew to a small lake near Duas, where he had a car ready for me, and I paid for the car, and then went back to Alexander's house. The road was dark and cold, and our house was dark, and I went into the house and looked around. It was pictures of our happy times, pictures of our relatives. I was shocked and just sat in a chair and stared. That's how I fell asleep at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock in the morning I was awakened by the sound of a car outside. I looked out and saw Erin getting out of a rented car. She walked up to the door with her bag, unlocked it and walked inside. I stood still and looked at her. She didn't move a muscle either, stood still and looked at me. She looked terrible, probably not much better than me. She said, "I've never screwed up in my life and I'm not going to screw up again, and I don't want to lose you." Donnie, I shrugged. "Erin, what did you think was going to happen when you decided to let Plato use you? Did you think I wouldn't notice because of me? Tell me. Did you?" And Plato set all this up. She put her head down and said, "No, he suggested that when we got there might be a replacement, and honestly I saw it coming. I saw how badly you wanted her. You were so nervous with her. Did you think we'd get back together? Have a baby or something? We both know we can't trust each other, but what makes you think that Plato would be any better than me? He turns me on. He's older and stronger and he knows what to do to get me. There are plenty of other men like Plato in the world and he's still with me. I didn't mean to lie to you, Donnie. It's all there in front of your eyes. She's not going to be seduced by some other man. Can't we just see what's going to happen next? You know, we've always had a great sex life and we've missed it and we can keep it up. And you never believed me. I thought about turning away, but he didn't." She took me upstairs. "The only thing we've always had and probably always will have is total sexual attunement. As soon as we go to bed we're together." So I sent her home. 10 years later I was picking up the kids from the school bus when 3.15 Jessica, who was 8, Robert, who was 6, and Helen, who wasn't even in school yet, who was 3. But I had a good woman to help me out and I got to write, and it took me over a year to trust Erin to get her off her meds. But when she was off her meds, our sex life took off, and the thought of me knocking her up got us both high. And I got on a plane after I'd knocked Simon and his entourage out of the water. And also, the wife of a character in the book was drugged with ecstasy so that she'd want the bad guy. But the bad guy was thrown into the ocean before I fully accepted her back. She signed a post-nuptial agreement that would have implications for both of us, and there would be no infidelity. School was now in session, and as I was driving the 2 oldest children home, a car pulled up to Orantlands. It was a little red sports car, and out of the car came a pair of extraordinary legs, followed by the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, who smiled and waved at the children, who ran up to her and shouted, Aunt Helen," who embraced them and began to shush little Helen. I poured her a soda, her favorite drink, and said Erin would be here soon. I had prepared a high-calorie salad, and everything in your room was ready. But that's a whole different story. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please consider bookmarking and subscribing. And if you haven't already done so, please feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below.